Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for these wonderful words. I thank Ministry of Law and Justice for inviting me for this webinar. Uh, Sir, before starting this, uh, can I ask any of the participants, because I have the list with me which says that these will be the paralegal volunteers and the pro bono advocates. So, a single individual or a single participant, I just want to know about him, about his impression regarding this workshop, regarding this webinar, so that I can take it forward in that manner, if it is possible, or else I'll start my presentation. Hello.
Ashutosh, we are having a dedicated question and answer session where we
Okay,
will
okay, okay,
directly
sir.
interact with participants. So I would request you to start. Please start your presentation.
Okay. So the topic given to me is implementation level challenges of PWDVA and best practices, Domestic Violence Act. So in this, in the first slide, please, yeah, in this first slide, there is a question being asked from the participant that what is the difference between sex and gender? So the impression regarding the sex in your minds and regarding the gender, how these two words they are different. We will be discussing them further, but to start with, I'll be saying that sex is associated with biological things. It is the biology, the biological determination, and gender is culturally defined. So when this act was enacted, and before that, we have seen this kind of the journey of violence or the domestic violence which the women in our country they have experienced, that the legislature has taken into account this violence, and in and by 1983 we have certain amendments in our Indian Penal Code by which certain provisions were added. For instance, 498A, the cruelty by husband and his relatives. So uh, taking this forward, and since 1983 we have moved to 2005 when this Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act was enacted, and it's been 15 years, more than 15 years, the violence is unabated. What is the reason behind that? So I'll be discussing more with the implementation aspect, but if we see the provisions of the act, which the learned experts after me, they will be taking the legal provisions as well as the role of protection officers and service providers. But just to sow the seed in the minds of the participants, I can say at the outset that this act is objective in nature. This act has objectivity. All the 37 provisions, they are well enacted. But how this implementation is still lagging because the humans are involved. There is subjective element to it. Please, the next slide. Yeah. So when we know that there is a subjective element to it. Subjective element because there are many stakeholders, and we know that there are beneficiary, and the beneficiary will be the aggrieved woman in this act. So the kind of violence being defined under the act is the physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, economic abuse. So when the aggrieved person, aggrieved lady, she experienced these kind of abuses, what is the remedy for her? Where she will go? She will ultimately look for certain kind of mechanism wherein these things can be cured. So is it available in this act? This question is for all the participants who will be asking the questions later on. I'm just putting the questions because I have to set the stage, and we will look into all these aspects together. Next slide, please. The key challenges, if you see in implementing this act from the prima facie, if we look into these challenges, they are the implementation of the legal provisions. The legal provision wherein there is a refusal of the police to file a case in some cases due to pressure from the accused family. We have seen this thing in most of the acts, and the same kind of thing we have seen in this act as well. A low rate of conviction in cases under 498A, which results in loss of confidence of the victim and aggrieved women. The delays in the criminal justice system resulting in lack of support. Often the woman has to fend for herself and children as the court procedure takes long. So these are the challenges, and we know that, in fact, today also we are looking for updating our legal knowledge. The provisions and the landmark judgments which will be taken up in this session, that these challenges, they are very much there. Law has a dynamism. Law moves as the society develops. So likewise, the kind of violence and the kind of challenges being faced as the time passes, they are being getting newer dimensions also. Next slide, please. So in the next slide, I have taken the role of a protection officer, which will be taken up by the next speaker also. I'll just look into certain things wherein there is a problem of implementation. The pre-litigation stage, the litigation, and post-litigation. These three phases wherein the victim has to go through, or the stakeholders, the role of stakeholders which play a crucial role in all these stages. Next slide. The participants will be learning about the domestic violence complaint. Next, please. Next slide. How a domestic violence complaint is filed, how a protection officer will be approached. Next. How protection and support will be given to the victim. So the first stage which the victim looks for is certain kind of hand holding. So is there any kind of provision which is available under the act? Where she will go? The law provides that there are various stakeholders, and one of them is protection officer, the counselors, the medical officers, the police officers. But when it comes to implementation, I have the list with me. Recently, we had conducted one protection officers program in collaboration with Labasna, Missouri. We have seen that there are the number of probation officers appointed, they are very less. And also, they are even part-time officers. Not only this, they are either appointed as the child development project officers, and they have the extra charge as a protection officer. So when it comes to the implementation of the provisions of this act, can it be said that the part-time officers, they will be giving justice to the work which is required? Because if we see that the number of cases being rising, although the government is doing its best kind of remedy, best kind of provisions, they are being enacted, and also the amendments being made, the modernization of forces being done, but still there is a long way to go. The provisions of this law, they are not being implemented, or I can say the results which we have obtained till date, they are not very satisfying. I will use the word satisfying and not satisfying, because as the things go on, as the provisions being implemented, there is an element of human being, the element of subjectivity. So the need of the hour is the development of standard operating procedures. Next slide, please. The standard operating procedures not only provides for a mechanism wherein every kind of thing being described in a manner. For instance, case study. Through case studies, the various stakeholders will be able to know the responsibility. I'll be just concluding in 2 minutes. I know there is a paucity of time and next speakers they are in the line. So the standard operating procedure I was discussing about. So wherein the case study method being used, the frequently asked questions. Yes, sir.
One small request. There are participants and they are conversant with Hindi. So if you can
अच्छा,
important
ठीक है सर,
aspects
बिल्कुल ठीक है.
you can highlight the importance
मैं
and
इसी वजह से पहले
important
पार्टिसिपेंट का जानना चाह रहा था, उनसे बात करके. कोई बात नहीं सर, यहाँ पे हम घरेलू हिंसा की बात कर रहे थे और हम उनको यहाँ पे किस तरीके से सपोर्ट किया जाए या किस तरीके से इस अधिनियम को लागू करने की हम बात कर रहे थे, जिसमें संरक्षण से लेके उनकी सुरक्षा की बात है. तो सुरक्षा के लिए हम यहाँ पे महिला की सुरक्षा और किस तरीके से जितने भी स्टेक होल्डर्स पूरे इस एक्ट को इम्प्लीमेंट करने में लगे हैं, उनके बारे में हमने यहाँ पे अभी बात करी. मैं ज्यादा बात नहीं करते हुए अपने को बहुत सीमित शब्दों में यहाँ पे अपना कंटेंट खत्म करूंगा, क्योंकि नेक्स्ट हम जब लीगल प्रोविजंस, लीगल एस्पेक्ट्स और रोल ऑफ वुमेन सेल और सिविल सोसाइटी ग्रुप लेंगे, तो लास्ट में ये वाली सारी चीजों का मैं एक बार से दोबारा रिकैप करना चाहूंगा, बिकॉज ultimately it is the human element which is involved, and that human element, the subjectivity, is responsible for the लगाड अप्रोच और इस एक्ट के इम्प्लीमेंटेशन में जो सुधार लाने की बातें. एक्ट बहुत अच्छा है, इसमें ऑब्जेक्टिविटी है, बट जो सब्जेक्टिव एलिमेंट के चलते, जिसमें पुलिस का रोल है, पुलिस के पास कोई महिला आती है और वहां से उसको प्रोटेक्शन ऑफिसर के पास भेजा जाए, क्या डेली डायरी में एंट्री होती है, नहीं होती है, कैसे ट्रेनिंग देनी चाहिए, वो हम सारी चीजों को लेंगे. तो मैं अपने यहीं पे अपने को रोकते हुए I'll pass over the mic to you, sir.